This is the Fifth Estate, coming to you from the Fort Hall School of Government in Nairobi, Kenya, and Professor Mutahi Ngunyi. This Sunday, we will end the year with a public notice to Gema and a message of hope for the rest of the country. Now, we are not opposed to Gema unity. In fact, they can unite until thy kingdom comes. But as they push for ethnic majoritarianism, we need to hold a mirror to their faces. We will show them what the rest of the country is seeing. Now, we know they do not care, but we will do it anyway. Isaac Newton taught us the third law of motion. He taught us that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If Kikuyus are uniting to remove Ruto, the reaction will be equal and opposite. If they are uniting not for love of the country, but for the love of ethnic majoritarianism, the equal and opposite reaction will kick in. The minority will gather around Ruto. If Kikuyus are 30% of the vote, the equal and opposite reaction will be 70%. The rest of the country will elect Ruto in a landslide in 2027. Not because he is good, but because Ruto will be a lesser enemy of country than Kikuyus. And this is how the 2027 election will become an anti-Kikuyu enterprise.
Public notice number 2. Kenya is not a colony of Kikuyus. And yes, we admit that they played a pivotal role in our liberation. But truth be told, the country has paid them back generously. Jomo was in power for 15 years. Mzee Moi was in power for 24 years, but all his vice presidents were Kikuyus. Fact. By 2002, Kikuyus were either president or vice president for 39 years. Fact. Then Mzee Kibaki took over for 10 years, and after him, there was Uhuru Kenyatta for another 10 years. By the time Ruto took over, Kikuyus had been president or vice president for 59 years. Then there was Ruto, who has been in power for 27 months. His deputy presidents have been Kikuyu throughout. And that makes it 61 years of independence, with Kikuyus as president for 35 years and vice president for 26 years. A total of 61 years. For 61 years, they have been president or vice president. Yet, they are only 30% of the total vote. The rest of the 70% of the Kenyan voters have no say, because Kenya has its owners for the last 61 years. We have nothing against the 30% Kikuyus, but we just want to hold a mirror to them. If every action attracts an equal and opposite reaction, their ethnic majoritarianism of 61 years will awaken the 70% Kenyans in favor of Ruto.
Public notice number 3. Kenya is not a colony of Kikuyus. It has other owners. If 70% of the voters are from other communities and 30% Kikuyus have dominated the presidency for 61 years, this must change. And we have a thought on how this will change. Did you notice how the Luos, the Luyas, the Kisis, and the rest of the country traveled home for Christmas? They used the Nakuru Highway. People traveling to Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Ethiopia used the same highway. This highway is a disaster. And without prejudice, Did you notice how the Gema people traveled home for Christmas? They drove on superhighways to their villages. Fact. Now, we will hold a mirror to the 70% who have been dominated for 61 years by the 30% voters. Why do you sleep for hours on roads that were built by the colonizers while Gema travels to their villages on superhighways? The answer is simple. Politics is about who gets what, when, and how. In sum, politics is about getting. Nothing more, nothing less. Why Gema has been in power for 61 years is because they have been getting. And that is why they travel home over Christmas in superhighways as the rest of the country squeezes through a narrow Nakuru highway.
Public notice number 4. Kikuyu privilege is over. This was granted by the Devonshire White Paper 101 years ago and the Swenaton Plan of 1954, 70 years ago. These are the colonial instruments that made Kikuyus superior to the other tribes. But now we have a dilemma. Kikuyu entitlement has been exposed. But instead of climbing down and going underground like the Mau Mau, they are playing the game of ethnic majoritarianism in the full glare of the nation. And this is where we go back to the Newton, that law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Gema rebellion will attract the 70% vote that has been dominated for 61 years by Kikuyus. And the 70% vote will rally behind Ruto. Not because they like him, but because the Gema majoritarianism is worse than a Ruto presidency. If politics is about who gets what, when, and how, Gema has gotten their full share of the national cake. And 2027 will be about the 70% of the Kenyans who have gotten nothing for 61 years of independence. And if country is angry with Ruto, they will prefer him to the Gema hegemony and privilege. It is that simple. Happy New Year, Kikuyus, and prosperous New Year to the 70% dominated by Kikuyu privilege. May you prosper and enjoy the fruits of your independence.